Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big topics into clear, understandable visuals.
You know, it can feel like this giant, complex machine with a mind of its own. But what if there was a way to actually see the controls?
Well, today, we're looking at a classic tool economists use to do just that, the ISLM model. And yeah, you can think of it as the master dashboard for a country's entire financial health. So this model gives us two absolutely crucial gauges that help us understand the whole economy, one for spending and one for money. And what it does, brilliantly, is show this delicate balance between two huge forces, the market for all the stuff we buy and sell, and the market for money itself.
All right, first up, let's look at that spending gauge on our dashboard. This is what we call the IS curve. The IS part stands for investment and saving. Basically, this curve shows us every single point where the economy's total output, that's the Y you see, perfectly matches total spending. And that's just the sum of everything we consume, businesses invest, the government spends, plus our net exports. For this all to be in balance, total investment pretty much has to equal total saving.
So this creates a relationship that slopes downward. Just think about it. When interest rates are low, it's way cheaper for companies to borrow money to build factories, or for you to get a mortgage. All that new spending gives the whole economy's income and output a nice boost.
But here's the thing. This curve doesn't just sit there. It can actually shift. For instance, if the government suddenly decides to spend a ton on new infrastructure, or if everyone suddenly feels really optimistic and starts shopping more, the whole IS curve shifts over to the right. That means we get a higher level of economic output at every single interest rate.
Okay, let's switch gears and move to the second gauge on our dashboard. This one tracks the money market, and it's called the LM curve. This time, LM stands for liquidity preference and money supply. Now, liquidity preference is just a fancy economist's way of saying how much we all want to hold on to cold, hard cash. So this curve shows us the balance point, where the amount of money people want to hold is exactly equal to the amount of money the central bank has pumped into the system.
So, check this out. Unlike the IS curve, the LM curve actually slopes upward. It makes sense when you think about it. As the economy grows and our incomes rise, we all need more cash for groceries, gas, you name it. And with a fixed supply of money out there, that higher demand makes it more expensive to borrow, pushing interest rates up.
So what moves this curve? Well, the main driver here is the central bank. If they decide to increase the money supply, basically printing more money or making it easier to get, the whole LM curve shifts to the right. And what that means is, for any given level of economic income, the interest rate will now be lower.
Okay, so we've got these two really powerful forces, right? Spending and money. And they're often pulling in totally different directions. So how in the world do they interact?
It all comes together at the sweet spot, that single point where the IS and LM curves intersect. This is the magic spot, the unique combination of interest rates and income, where both the goods market and the money market are humming along in perfect equilibrium.
This is the theoretical goal, really. It's that point of stability that policymakers are always trying to understand and, well, influence. You could call it the economy's perfect cruising altitude.
And that brings us to the really cool part, how policymakers actually use this dashboard. They've got two main levers they can pull to try and steer the economy.
So on one side, you have the government with its fiscal policy. They can change taxes or their own spending to move that IS curve around. And on the other side, you have the central bank. They're in charge of monetary policy, and they can control the money supply to shift the LM curve.
Let's see it in action. Say the government decides to boost spending on new roads. That directly increases demand and income, right? So the IS curve shifts to the right. The economy grows, but it also nudges interest rates up a little.
But there's a catch. That big government spending spree also drives up the demand for money, which, as we saw, raises interest rates. For a private company, that means it's now more expensive to borrow for their own projects. This is what we call the crowding out effect. The government spending can actually end up squeezing out private investment.
Now, what about the central bank? If they want to give the economy a jolt, they can increase the money supply. This shifts the LM curve to the right, which pushes interest rates down. That makes it cheaper for everyone to borrow, which should encourage more investment and spending.
The thing is, these tools aren't foolproof, not even close. The real world is a messy place, and sometimes these levers just don't work the way the model says they should.
And one of the biggest challenges is something called a liquidity trap. This is a pretty scary scenario, and it's not just theoretical.
We've seen it happen in places like Japan back in the 90s, and then again in the US and Europe right after the 2008 financial crisis.
Here's the problem. Interest rates are already at or near zero. At that point, the central bank's main tool, cutting rates to boost the economy, is completely useless. You can't go lower than zero, right? Pumping more money into the system doesn't really work because people and businesses just hoard the cash instead of spending or investing it.
So look, the ISLM model gives us this incredibly powerful dashboard for making sense of the economy, but it also shines a massive spotlight on the limits of our controls. And it forces us to ask a really tough question. As the world gets more complex and new crises keep popping up, is this old dashboard going to be enough to navigate what's coming next?